Good evening, everyone. And I'll say Madam Chairman, and Penny, ladies and gentlemen, we've been looking forward to this evening and to meeting you here. February is Black History Month. It provides an opportunity to share our experiences. Not too often do we share our work and who we are and our family, but here's an opportunity. So we thank Penny and the members here who invited us. I too would like to share a history moment which involved some of your members. In the 1970s, your executive invited us to tell the history of our BME church and settlement located on 7th Street. Well, it was our late uncle, Reverend Wilfred Sheffield, who encouraged us to participate and support the local historical society as a gesture of friendship and inclusion. Well, we did. Not only did we sing, we reenacted a 2-hour presentation complete with props, costumes, black and white actors and actresses, written by Uncle Will. We included the whole community. And your members in the community packed our little church. I remember that, and I still have a copy of that play. Also, your society included our little BME songster group a number of years ago to sing at the former library on Maple Street. You have always been a part of our journey. We have an old spiritual we sing that says, "We've come this far by faith, and we can't turn back." I'll turn the program over to my sister for part 1 now.
Thanks, Carolyn.
You're welcome, Sylvia.
I agree with saying, but all the little mishaps that you've had this evening, we had a few too. Carolyn and I arrived early. We said we'd get all our things packed at the door and ready just to scoot in as soon as they open at 6 o'clock. Well, we did that. We got everything in, and Carolyn says, "Where's my speech?" So we looked through all our bags, looked through the car. I drove back home, and there it is sitting on the step. So we got here. Second mishap, the cord I brought to connect my laptop to Mary Lou's projector, wrong ends. So plan B. There's always a plan B. So Mary Lou has a mouse, and we're going to start with our story. One thing about Sheffield Park, we're always telling stories, and basically that's how we started. Uncle Howie, am I clicking? There we go. He had a love of family and a passion for stories. And it was his dream and his vision that actually got us underway. His family was number one in his life. His father, Wilfred, on the far left, and his mother sitting in front, Wilfred and Ilda. His 3 brothers in the back, Edward, Franklin, and Wilfred. And our mom, Yvonne, sitting in the middle. Wilfred and Ilda, Gran and Pop. They were always a good pair together. Pop was sailing, Gran was home with the 5 kids. And then one time, Pop needed a second cook. Well, who better to trust? Who better to work with? And who would take most orders? Sometimes. His wife, Ilda. So she went sailing with him. And they asked the 5 kids, "Do you think you can run the home? Can you get to school? Can you get to your jobs, little jobs they had? Keep going to church?" Yep, they said they could. And while Pop and Gran were sailing, the kids were home taking care of themselves. While the boat Pop was on was going to be scrapped. So Pop, with the vision that he had, asked the captain, "What are you going to do with the stove?" "Oh, we're just going to get rid of it." And he said, "Well, if you don't mind, I could use it. I have a place for it to go. Sheffield Cedar Inn." So while Pop was cooking, Gran was taking care of the dining room and the guests. You could come for a Sunday brunch, banquets, weddings, and we even saved the original tables and chairs and the Georgian china dishware as part of our display at the museum. How many were at the restaurant at some time or other? Do you remember the meals? Did you get your glass of juice, your fruit salad or soup, your main course, your dessert, coffee, tea, roast chicken, roast beef, roast turkey, T-bone steak, pork chop, fried white fish, baked ham. The most expensive dinner? $2.50. And we survived. Imagine that today. Well, Uncle Howie had these little tin-plated pictures, and you'd have to hold them up to the light to really see what they were. Some had color, and some were black and white. And we kept asking, who are these people? And he said, well, that's Granny so-and-so, or that's Uncle such and such. So he said, we can't see who they really are. So we had them enlarged, and we found family members. And we brought some pictures with us today of some of our family members, and if you want to know their names, we'll talk to you later about them. But this is where we started. People were always asking, well, where did the Sheffields come from? Well, actually, the Sheffield family is made up of a whole bunch of families, and we all intertwine between different communities. But Sheffields, we'll just stick with the main family core for the moment. We came from Artemisia, and this was the homestead, and Carolyn will talk more about that later on. But we thought, for Black History Month, we start telling people who the Sheffields were and where we came from. And what better place, because we didn't have a museum building, but the church, Heritage Community on 7th Street. And yes, we're known as the Little Colored Church, but no, we are not just a little colored church. It was built in the early 1800s for the Black community, because a lot of the folks back then weren't comfortable going into white churches, knowing all the experiences they've had before. And sometimes they just weren't welcome in some of the white churches. So they wanted to build their own. But being where their homes were, we had white neighbors. So lo and behold, everybody went to church together. So yeah, we were built for the Black people, but it's always been a community church, and it still is today. Actually, we are the minority in the church. So Mom, Yvonne, and Uncle Howie started putting on displays, and they started talking about the history. But a lot of seniors came, community groups would come, but most importantly, it was the children. Uncle Howie wanted to reach the younger folks. Said, let them know who we are, what we're about, and get to know us as a community. So his love was spreading the history, but reaching the younger generation. Progress. While we were doing all the displays at the church, the highway changed. There went the Cedar Inn restaurant parking lot. You can see where the telephone poles are, right up near the front door, and it took our front parking lot. This is what we looked like for a couple years. And because of that, the restaurant had to close. God is good. Gran and Pop knew what war was like. Pop served with his 5 brothers in World War I, and when his 3 sons were overseas for World War II, he and Gran wondered what kind of condition they might come home in. And they said, in case they can't get jobs, in case they can't go back out into society, let's buy some property and we'll have a place we can call our own. This is in the 1940s. They purchased Long Point Road, a property right at the end on the waterfront. And the reasoning behind it was for their boys, for the future, but also to build a homestead. So while they were trying to build their homestead and they were running the restaurant at the same time, people would come and take the nice big stones from the foundation and remove them from the property. So it was always a constant battle trying to maintain the two properties. So when the restaurant closed, am I clicking here? There we go. We thought, what are we going to do? So out at Long Point Road, we had put a tent and trailer. It was just rough land, natural trees and settings and everything. And we said, well, we don't need a building, just need washrooms. We can get water from the lake, brought the water in, and we just had tent and trailers. Well, that went on for a few years, about 8 years. Progress. Township decided they needed a sewage outflow pipe. Blue Mountain Crippled Children's Camp, Sheffield Park. Crippled Camp, Sheffield Park. Sheffield Park. We got the outflow pipe right out in front of us. And you know what the lake bottom's like? Solid rock, constant blasting, constant drilling. People that were camping couldn't sleep, so the tent and trailer closed. Now, what are we going to do? We have pictures. And a friend of ours told us about some portables coming up for sale at Base Borden. They didn't need them anymore. So, Carolyn, on the phone, can we buy some portables? Sure, we'll just send them up. So we got a couple portables. And we started putting our family pictures in the portables. And it was great. And we were called the Black Cultural Museum, because it was our family. And on the property, we saved some big boulders, because we wanted to remember all of the ancestors that had contributed to Grey and Simcoe counties, especially our grandparents. This is for Isle and Wilfrid. Great Lakes sailors, marine history of the men and women of color that sailed on the lakes. The early Black pioneer families. But community started to say, hey, we're part of the community too. We remember the Sheffields, we remember the Millers, the Thompsons. Yeah, we were part of that, and we have things that might go along to go with your museum. So they started donating some of the things from our local community. Name change, Sheffield Park, Black History and Cultural Museum, because we had to include everybody. It wasn't just our history anymore. They started bringing things like things from the barn, things outside the barn, ornaments on the lawn, ornaments on the pond, magazines, books, and more books, and more books. Records, things to play the records on, Black memorabilia, postcards, gollywogs from England, which are now banned, dolls of color, dolls of culture, doll collections, to collectible dolls, to doll houses, pottery, to quilts. From African huts to African hats. From kings to artisans to musicians to warriors. From iron chains to steam irons. From pioneer furniture to vintage clothing. From hockey stars to track and field champions to 1932 Olympians. From pre-Civil War to World Wars I and II. From wooden boats to boats of steel. From waterways to railways. This is Sheffield Park, Black History and Cultural Museum. But we're not just contained on a little piece of property in Clarksburg. We expand far, far away from Clarksburg itself. We're in contact with other museums, other communities, other organizations that are all promoting history, and we're finding out we link. We have things in common that we didn't know, we have families in common that we're finding out, but most importantly, we have a story to tell. And Carolyn, I'm going to let you tell a little more of the story.
I think I can click from here.
It's nice having my sister with me tonight, too.
I'll wait for a second. You ready?
Yes. The Oral Church in Edgar, Earl Medonti Township. And this next section summarizes our direct connection with several established Black settlements. One being the Oral African Methodist Episcopal Church, located at the intersection of Line 3 of Oral Medonti, Side Road 10 and 11, known as the Old Berry Road. And from the 1980s to date, our museum and local church congregation have supported the Oral Historical Committee in their effort to preserve the last, oldest log building erected by African Canadians. It represents the role played by Black military men in defense of Upper Canada during the War of 1812, called the Colored Corps. This church was built in 1849, designated in 2002 as a national site. It gained support from Parks Canada, various ministries, and many citizens. And we as direct descendants appreciate all the efforts to preserve this landmark. And special thanks to our good friend, Tim Crawford. Next stop, Priceville, Ontario. Our attention was turned to Artemisia Township. In 1989, the Old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee invited us to join their membership. Their chairman, the late Les McKinnon, needed proof that descendants were actually buried and related to those in the Priceville Cemetery, that we were related to them. Wasn't buried yet, but before the municipality would grant approval for restoration of the site. Well, our museum contributed necessary information, oral history, family names, photo, and we even found the Sheffield homestead on that very road. And for 25 years, I can't believe how time runs fast. For 25 years, we served on the executive as president, secretary, and volunteers included the Millers, Greens, Cromwells, the Hardings, Hartleys, Colclaws, and the Thompsons. Neighbors and descendants also helped to maintain the cemetery. In 1990, 4 monuments were located with evidence that 80 shafts still exist, buried on the site and on the roadway. And today, a new pavilion houses the tombstones with ancestors' names inscribed on the interior. And on the roof there, maybe Sylvia can show it there, on the roof are the names of Black families who settled. And it just happens, Howard was one of the family names, and the other family name was Sheffield. But by chance, they were both put together, and we stood there and said, Howard Sheffield. His name was. And to date, the leadership under President Naomi Norquay and the committee continues with the support of Robert Leverty, from the Ontario Historical Society. But it's just wonderful to go out there and just sit there and see progress has come along. Next, up the creek, Negro Creek Road. Concerned citizens of Holland Township expressed dismay as a road name and a sign had been quietly removed in order to coordinate the 911 code. We were contacted by a group of citizens living on Negro Creek Road and alerting us to its removal and the new name Moggy Road erected. Well, at that time, another road had been changed, but neighbors petitioned and it was reinstated. The municipality had deemed it offensive and recognized the family name Moggy. But Moggy hadn't resided there for long, maybe just for 4 years, instead of the lengthy existence of our road name. But as descendants, we realized that oral history and several surveys between 1831 and 1858 proved there was a well-established, vibrant settlement existed in Holland Township in Grey County. We were already there. The names Negro Creek Road and Negro Lake were landmarks. And at this particular site, our cemeteries were already lost. What's in a name? Well, 500 signatures, news media coverage, and support from the former Lieutenant Governor, Lincoln Alexander, Alvin Curling, many societies, convinced the Ontario Human Rights Commission to restore the name. That's all we had, a landmark. And a play was written shortly after that about Negro Creek Road by a lady named Janet Searles, and she was called A Black Girl in Search of God, and she included our museum in that, so we're in the movie somewhere. And then that was the time I had to smile. The media was covering the story, but they were calling somebody called, some woman up there called a black activist in Simcoe County, and it was me. But it was humorous, but it was bringing awareness. So I smiled about that. I saved all the newspapers. Parks Canada. Well, late September 1998, Parks Canada heard of our museum and included us in a bus excursion to study the Underground Railroad in the United States. At that time, there were no national sites reflecting Black history in Canada. This inquiry resulted in several Black history museums being deemed national. In 1999, Nazarene African Methodist Church, North American Black History Museum in Amherstburg, the North Buxton Settlement, you've heard of that one, the Elgin Settlement, St. Catharines, Harriet Tubman area there, and Niagara Falls, along with several others as significant sites. And although we were not recognized, we were recognized, I should say, we were not selected. And knowing that funding might not be forthcoming, we decided to incorporate our museum November 17th, 2000 as a nonprofit. We'll just carry on. But we're in the records. Well, the Owen Sound area isn't too far from Collingwood. And you probably know that Owen Sound and Collingwood were two northerly terminals for the Underground Railroad. So that's part of our importance in this area. And the Cairn there. We were invited to participate in the Emancipation Day celebrations at Harrison Park in Owen Sound just a couple of years ago. And the Cairn there is a memorial to the first Black settlers, and in the encasement are stones from various slave states in the United States. Am I right? Got that?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. We were presented with a stone from the Choptank River in Maryland by a lady named Elaine McGill. Elaine McGill has traced her ancestry from Maryland to Owen Sound and found her people. And Elaine brought a rock from the bed of that river. That's where they started from to start the Underground Railroad. And that rock, or stone, is now in our museum. And our promise was that anyone who visited the museum could actually pick it up and touch the stone. So when you come to Sheffield Park, it's like a hands-on in some areas. That was the Cairn. And last but not least, Canfield. What are we going to do in Canfield? Well, this past year we linked with the Haldeman County. The community there was looking for support. They're attempting to restore a black settlement, and they have evidence that their area too was an Underground Railroad site in Cayuga area. I don't know, Sylvie, if you can read some of that plaque, if that would work.
The placement of this marker is to commemorate the black settlers who fled from the United States to Canada through the Underground Railroad. Heritage Haldeman, the Canfield Community Center in Haldeman County in partnership offer this recognition. For the slaves coming from the United States to Canada, the Indiana Road to Canfield was a passage to freedom. The first known settler was Samuel Cooper in 1837. In 1844, church services took place in the home of Stepney and Lucy Streets, in the village of Canfield. By 1851, the North Cayuga census identified 137 black settlers living in Canfield and the surrounding area. Later in 1882, on property previously deeded by Mr. Street, the Brick Baptist Church was built on the corners of numbered 56 and 3 highways. This small community was a safe haven which welcomed the blacks with respect, compassion, and acceptance. Residents and the new settlers lived, worked, attended community schools, and worshiped together in Canfield.
And this presentation just gives you an overview of who we are and perhaps where we're all going. And I think Sylvia has a few little events coming up. I'll just close with that. Upcoming events, we've been busy. February Black History Month, we get a little extra busy in February. We had the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine here a couple of weeks ago. And Ms. Augustine left us a plaque of I guess it was the motion to recognize Black History Month, so we have that. But we have coffee hour on Wednesday, so March the 4th, we have Mike Jarrett, and he's talking about did emancipation bring freedom? Just a bit of chat and discussion. And March the 11th on a Wednesday, we invited Sharon Stewart. Sharon's working with newcomers in our area, and there's cultural awareness for all of us, so we're all encompassing. If you have any questions, we'd be glad. Sylvia will handle the questions. If you have any questions, we'll entertain. If not, just wanted to say how happy we are to be here. We've enjoyed our lives. Lots to do. We left some brochures on the table there. We will open May, I think it's the last Tuesday, May the 26th. And looking forward to having some visitors. We have about 16 buildings now, 4 monuments. And bring the running shoes, takes a bit to walk around the area. And volunteers are welcome when we bring in the big buses. We'd like to have a few extra people to help us with guiding people. Great having us. Thank you very much. We've enjoyed this, Irene. Thanks.